virtually is Tomiwa Fadeyi. He is a legal practitioner. Good morning, Tomiwa Fadeyi, and welcome to the show.
Good morning, Mr. Olumide. Good morning. I'm happy to be here again. It's always a pleasure to be on this show with you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure for having you. All right, so let's start off with the topic for today. I will start by asking you this important question. What are the key compliance challenges business face, when entering the new international market?
Well, thank you for that. This topic, like you have rightly said, is an actual topical issue that is facing especially business owners and people in that category. There's a major need for people to come to terms with the international laws regulating businesses and all of those in order to have each free passage, so to say, right? One of the challenges to the question that Mr. Olumide had asked me, one of the challenges that people face the most when it comes to businesses and international trade is actually the lack of familiarity, right, with the legal framework. There's a legal framework for virtually everything, and if you are not familiar with the legal framework, you may run into issues applying your international trade. So many people actually either do not know that there are legal frameworks in place which must be strictly adhered to, or they just don't know the extent of those frameworks. They don't know the intricacies, which are attached to those frameworks, and that's a major issue, so to say, when it comes to international trade. Another issue is documentation, right? Many what you get from experience, what I know, I'm sorry to say this, is that some Nigerian business people do not take documentation seriously. They do not take their registrations seriously. You have people who claim to ply a trade and are not even registered with the Corporate Affairs Commission as mandated by the Companies and Allied Matters Act, right? You have people who claim to run a business, and even though they are registered, you realize that registration is just routine. Some of them just get registered and do not even follow up on payment of annual returns, right? You realize that there are some of them who do not even update their records. So when you run a search through the Corporate Affairs Commission portal, you realize that some people put a particular address. When you get there, no house has ever been built there, not to talk of having a registered office. You see, there are many issues. You talk about risk assessment. We can go on and on. You talk about internal controls and all that. So there are many issues facing business owners, especially when it has to do with international trade. And until and unless these issues are actually addressed and sorted out, long-term solutions, then it may be extremely difficult, right, to get things in place for proper ease of business.
Talking about ease of business, right? Let's switch some gears a little bit here. How can companies effectively manage and mitigate the impact of tariffs on their international supply chains?
Well, when you talk about tariffs, right, you have to realize that there's something called tariff classification, right? You see, you must classify tariffs. You must classify your goods based on a harmonized system, right? To determine, that is what determines the applicable tariff rates. And this is the only way you can avoid penalties, especially for misclassification. If you are unable to classify your goods, if you are unable to classify your trade properly using what is called the harmonized system codes, you may run into troubles, with tariff rates, with penalties when you have misclassified or you have miscalculated. One of the ways to actually effectively go about tariffs is, first of all, to classify those tariffs properly. Let me also say that you don't have to do everything yourself as a business owner. That's another misconception.
Yes.
You must engage experts. You should engage experts. the first thing I tell people is that you should get a lawyer. Well, maybe because I'm a lawyer, but I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
You have to get a lawyer. A lawyer is expected to know, if not, and the lawyer is not expected to know everything anyways, but a lawyer is expected to have an idea about all of these things. If he doesn't, a lawyer knows where to get those ideas, right? A lawyer is not somebody who knows all the laws, somebody who knows where to get the laws and apply them, how to search for those laws and apply them. So you have to get a lawyer, you have to get experts. It is these experts that will classify your tariffs properly for you, right? After tariff classification, you have to talk about tariff calculation. You must be able to calculate tariffs. Different tariffs are applicable to different sorts of trades. That's talking about classification now. Different tariffs are applicable to different sorts of trade. In some countries, there are extra import duties which you must pay. It's their regulation. When you are in Rome, you have to behave like a Roman. It's their law. You have to abide with it, especially when you are in those countries, right? So classify your tariffs properly. You must calculate your tariffs accurately. When you want to calculate your tariffs, you must take into view factors like custom valuation methods, factors like tariff rates, and other applicable exemption or reliefs. Some people have exemptions, some people have reliefs. You must put that into consideration before you can then talk about calculating tariffs accurately. You must also look at tariff management, right? You must implement strategies such as tariff engineering. That's modifying your products to legally reduce duty liabilities. I don't know if I've put that rightly.
Yes.
Modifying your products legally now.
Legally.
Right? I'm not talking about legally. I'm not talking about circumventing the law, right? But modifying your products to legally reduce duty liabilities, right? You must be able to modify, and that is why your registration as a company is important. Because when you want to register a company, well, in Nigeria where I practice, there's something we call Memorandum and Article of Association, which we call MEMAT for short. Your objects, the objects of your company, you would write them down. Those are the things that you want to venture into. You register them with the companies. You must be able to modify those products. For instance, if you consult me as a lawyer and you tell me, oh, you want to do, I don't want to give examples on live TV, but you want to do something, I should be able to relate what you want to venture into to what the applicable laws are, right? And then I should be able to say, no, let us adjust it this way so that it falls within a certain category that doesn't impose overbearing or stringent liabilities on you, right? That is part of our job, our jobs as a lawyer. So you must do what we call tariff management. I've talked about tariff classification, I've talked about tariff calculation, I've talked about tariff management. I think one other important aspect is duty optimization, right? Which, a lot of people don't really, it's quite technical, but duty optimization, you have to explore preferential trade agreements, PTAs, and free trade agreements, which you know as FTAs, to benefit from reduced tariffs or zero tariffs, right? So that's where you lower costs and then you enhance competitiveness, right? So these are ways to actually manage the issue of tariffs, right? Like I said earlier, you have to consult an expert or experts. You have to consult business experts, you have to consult your legal experts and all of that. Because I can't say everything on TV, we have limited time. But these that I have mentioned are very major factors, are very major issues, that relate to tariffs.
Yeah, before my colleague Olumide comes in, now you said consult experts like lawyers. Would you call customs brokers important people to consult as well in this case?
Well, yes. Yes. I will consider custom brokers, important people. You see, the issue of customs, right, is quite important, right? Customs are actually the government arm or the government agency, and they are responsible for regulating the flow of goods. To put it simply, the flow of goods in and out of a country. It's also the customs that actually enforce trade laws, that collect duties, that collect taxes, and that ensure compliance with import and export regulations, because there are import and export regulations. So it is the customs, that aspect of customs that deal with ensuring compliance with those regulations, that deal with regulating the flow of goods in and out of a country, that deal with enforcing trade laws. When you listen to the news, especially in Nigeria, you hear that our borders have been closed to this, and that. Our borders have been closed to this, and that. You cannot export this, you cannot import this. Custom brokers are actually the one that put you through those phases. So I consider them experts too. They are actually very important.
Okay, fantastic.
All right, thank you very much for that. I was going to ask you, how important is it for businesses, to stay updated with global trade laws, and what resources can they use? Because, of course, while we have our local laws, we also have global trade laws, which you must adhere to if you are going to go into international trade.
It is extremely important. I was going to mention that. You see, I think that or let me say, when some of my clients come to me to say they want to venture into global trade, one of the things I tell them, now I'm giving consultation without payment, but one of the things I tell them is that you must engage in continuous education. You must stay updated. It's a must. You must stay updated on regulatory changes and market trends, impacting global trade to adapt strategies accordingly. If you are not updated on those things, you run into problems. Continuous education is a major issue. That's what I call it. It's a major issue. You have to stay updated. You have to stay glued to the news. And you must also develop a network of partners. This is part of my strategy for success. For people who want to venture into global, you must develop a network of partners. That's global networking. Freight forwarders, brokers, like the co-host said, trade associations. That is the way you leverage on industry knowledge and resources, right? You must be flexible, you must be agile. There are so many things that you must do, right? And so continual education, like Mr. Olumide said, stays on top of that list. It must be updated. It's a must, because the law is dynamic. The law changes virtually all the time. So people actually fix regulations, or let me say countries fix regulations depending on their realities. Some countries fix regulations depending on their economic realities, depending on the legality of it. If you are going to import or export ammunition, for instance, arms and ammunition, you must be seized with the knowledge governing that part of global trade.
Yes.
There are some countries that, based on their legal realities now, they will not allow you to be an easy ride. While there are some that are, just go in, import it and all of that. So if you lack this knowledge, you will run into troubles. You can even run into legal problems. You can commit a crime without knowing it. And you know that ignorance of the law is never an excuse.
Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned something I wanted to take you back earlier on. You talked about the free trade agreements and all that. So what strategies can business use, to benefit from free trade agreements and also, like you rightly said, reduce tariff cost?
Well, that is actually a question that is dependent on so many factors, right? We have to be sure first about what products you are looking into, right? We have to be sure again about what countries you are considering when it comes to global trade. So unless these factors are actually put in place, I may not be able to actually, but like I said, I'll go back to my insistence on getting an expert. An expert will know how to enable you benefit from free trade agreements, right? Or preferential trade agreements, so that you can benefit, reduce tariffs or zero tariffs, so that you lower costs, you enhance competitiveness and all that. But it depends largely on your products. It depends largely also on the countries you are actually working with when it comes to your trade, when it comes to your global trade.
All right. Now, earlier on you talked about the role of consulting experts and how important this is. Now, let's take a look at other factors that enhances global trade. How can technologies such as automated customs compliance software enhance trade operations?
Well, like I said, regulations are dynamic, right? A software which enables you automatically to see customs regulations and you see, the first thing you must do is to have a checklist. You must have a checklist of those regulations. You must say, okay, this is what this country allows, this is what they don't allow. Now, if this country allows this, can I conform to the tenor of this regulation? And then you now say, technology has enhanced every field of life, one way or the other. But what you now have to do is to say that a software which enhances automated, customs checklists and all of that, be extremely important for someone who really wants to go into global trade or international trade, right? Because that enables you have a checklist, that enables you update your checklist, right? And that ensures that you don't run into problems. Yeah, because but it must be updated. That's one issue, right? Because today you can hear that the border is closed, tomorrow it's open, and all of that. So you must stay updated by yourself, and then you must now put this technology to good use, to actual use. Because the technology can be there and people do not use it. So you must put it to good and actual use. And I think that assists a great deal, a great deal. I'm saying this because I know that people run into a lot of problems with customs when it comes to import and export. So you must be familiar. In fact, before venturing into any business, your best bet is to have engaged those experts, right? Not after you ventured into it. Your best bet is to have engaged those experts, sit down with them, let them tell you what each country actually takes and what they don't take, right? Do your research, submit applications to the necessary ministries, the necessary government agencies, intimate them of what you have in mind. You write a letter, it is allowed. Many people do not explore this means, but it is actually allowed. Do a letter. If you are going to engage in import of agricultural or agro-allied products in Nigeria, for instance, you should write to the Ministry of Agriculture, telling them that these are your intentions and these are the ways you think that your trade can benefit the country. Then actually ask them what are the regulations that you need to comply with, so that way you have established a relationship and then you have made efforts to actually find out the regulations that you have to comply with so that you don't run into problems.
All right, before we go, I'd like to ask this question. It's quite important. What role does a country's diplomatic relations with others play in international business trade? Does it help boost international businesses? Let's say, for instance, Nigeria and maybe Niger and all that. If the diplomatic relations is not too strong, does it help? Does it negate international businesses?
Yes, it does. It does to a great deal. Diplomatic relations between countries are extremely important. Everybody is aware of what's happening between Nigeria and the United Arab Emirates, and how the government now is trying to salvage that situation which has been going on for quite some time, right? If we do not have a fantastic relationship with, I'm talking about countries to countries now. International law, I would have delved into international law a bit, but for lack of time. But if a country now does not have a fantastic relationship with another country, if in the first place they will not even grant you a visa, it will be extremely difficult for you to even manage a business involving that country when it comes to international trade. And then you see that for countries that are magnanimous enough to grant you visas and all that, they subject certain sets of people to more stringent regulations, right? You realize that some rules that apply to you from a particular country do not actually apply to some other persons from another country, right? A client of mine reached out to tell me that, he was actually trading in a particular country. His home address and his office address were actually in different countries. But for the fact that he is a national of a particular country, I don't want to, list those countries. But for the mere fact that he is a national of a particular country, they have subjected him to periodic checks. They have subjected him to periodic impromptu visits, subjected him to resubmission of even documents, and that's quite a lot, because compared to his other partners, compared to his other business partners who are engaged in the same sort of trade from different nationalities, they don't put them through those things. So diplomatic ties are actually very important. That is why our government must do its best, must do it for the benefit of its people. Our government must do its best to ensure that it has at least a working relationship, right, with other countries that will aid trade. There are countries that are the powers of the world, right, which There are countries which you must trade in, which will actually aid, when you have a fantastic relationship with them and which you must trade with. There are countries like that. You can't do without them
Yeah.
when you talk about global trade.
Absolutely. This is a safe place for us to learn. It has been so insightful. Thank you so much for being a part of the show this morning.
I'm grateful. Thank you very much for having me always. It's always a pleasure to be here. And please have a wonderful remainder of the day.
Thank you. You too.